The greatest financial deception of the modern era is not inflation, it is not corporate greed, and it is certainly not the taxation system. It is the deeply programmed, almost religious belief that you must aggressively eliminate every single penny of your low-interest debt to achieve moral and financial salvation. Society has engineered a brilliant, invisible trap designed to drain your most valuable asset, which is your highly liquid seed capital. Before you even understand how leverage actually works, millions of people are walking voluntarily into a state of financial paralysis, proudly sending their hard-earned dollars to massive banking institutions to prematurely pay off a 3 or 4% mortgage or a subsidized student loan, entirely missing the undeniable mathematical reality of the time value of money. They are working exhausting jobs they deeply hate just to achieve a completely false sense of emotional security, all to compete in a rigged game where the only guaranteed prize is becoming completely illiquid, completely unable to take asymmetric risks, and entirely dependent on a fragile corporate salary to survive the next inevitable crisis. And if you want to understand why the middle class is mathematically doomed to extinction, you only need to look at how they are taught to view their own liabilities. But if you want to receive the unfiltered, contrarian truth that polite society and traditional financial advisors are desperately trying to hide from you behind a veil of fake moral superiority, subscribe to the channel right now, because what comes next will absolutely shatter everything you have been taught about money, showing you exactly how the institutions you trust are actively using your biological fear of debt to mine your future for their own profit. The trap is so perfectly disguised as the ultimate financial good that people do not even see the iron bars of their own cage. They genuinely believe that being completely debt-free in a global economy built on rapidly depreciating fiat currency is a guarantee of safety, when the cold, calculating reality dictates that it is actually a guaranteed, irreversible path to financial mediocrity and missed opportunity. You are buying into the middle-class script that conditions you through mimetic desire to chase the hollow status of saying you have a zero balance at suburban dinner parties, instead of building actual asymmetric wealth in the background. You are being explicitly taught to play it incredibly safe, to be a compliant worker completely devoid of any leverage, to fight tooth and nail for incremental gains while voluntarily destroying your own purchasing power. But the brutal truth is that treating all debt as an absolute moral evil is a philosophy exclusively for losers and the mathematically illiterate. The herd is being led to the financial slaughterhouse by an entire industry of traditional finance authors who operate exactly like a pacifying religion, selling an illusion of historical safety while saddling you with massive, unrecoverable opportunity costs. I know this intimately, not from reading conventional, outdated economics textbooks, but because I saw it firsthand when I was navigating the early, hyper-competitive days of Silicon Valley, surrounded by brilliant but profoundly misguided people who were terrified of utilizing leverage, who were desperately trying to pay off their small personal liabilities while completely missing the exponential technological revolution happening right in front of them, engaging in a toxic war of attrition with their own bank accounts just to feel emotionally safe. I realized that if I had followed the herd's manual, if I had focused my energy on aggressively paying off my student loans or avoiding risk instead of aggressively allocating capital towards the future, I would have never had the liquidity to build PayPal. I would have been running a frantic, exhausting race I should not even be in, fighting a battle where the winner just gets a zero balance and zero actual power to change the world, until I realized that the only way to build true generational wealth is to step completely, unapologetically outside the matrix of conventional wisdom, to stop aggressively paying down cheap debt and start deploying that highly valuable capital into asymmetric technological bets. And before we continue to mathematically dismantle this intellectually bankrupt system point by point, tell me right here in the comments which state you are watching from. I want to know exactly how many independent, contrarian thinkers are in this fight with me today, who possess the intellectual courage to understand that money is a tool and not a master. Write down your city right now and let us form a relentless community of people who truly want to break the mold and achieve absolute financial sovereignty through superior capital allocation. Now, I want you to meticulously consider the cold, ruthless logic behind the first massive error you are making, which is the catastrophic decision to prematurely pay off a low-interest, fixed-rate mortgage simply to appease your anxiety, The herd willingly falls into this trap because human beings are biologically terrified of owing anything. They entirely fail to understand that inflation is a hidden, aggressive tax on the poor and a massive, invisible subsidy for those who hold fixed-rate debt. So they blindly take their highly valuable, present-day liquid dollars and hand them to the bank to pay off a loan that is naturally being inflated away anyway, and the immediate consequence of this herd behavior is that you completely evaporate your liquid capital. You trap your wealth entirely inside the wooden walls of a physical house, rendering you entirely unable to take the asymmetric risks required to build real wealth because you literally have absolutely no cash left to invest when the global market inevitably crashes and presents a generational opportunity. Let us look at the brutal, undeniable mathematics of conventional wisdom right here and right now. If you are 35 years old and you follow the herd by aggressively overpaying your 4% fixed-rate mortgage, taking $1,000 of your hard-earned, highly valuable liquidity every single month, and aggressively throwing it at the principal balance simply because a traditional finance guru told you that the borrower is slave to the lender, you are completely destroying your financial trajectory. You are violently bleeding thousands of dollars a month in pure opportunity cost. And if you simply stretch that behavior out over 20 years, this transforms into hundreds of thousands of dollars evaporated permanently into a broken, unrewarding system. You might proudly save $50,000 or $60,000 in interest, but this is the real measurable cost of your desperate need for emotional validation. You foolishly traded exponential growth for a tiny reduction in inflation-eaten debt. You are literally financing your own stagnation and guaranteeing your reliance on a corporate employer. Now look at the completely opposite reality. Look at the cold, calculating, contrarian path. If you step out of the matrix today, completely refuse to participate in the debt-free illusion, stop overpaying that cheap mortgage, pay only the absolute minimum required by the contract, retain your precious liquidity, and allocate that exact same capital towards an asymmetric advantage or a high-yield index fund, investing that $1,000 a month into the S&P 500 with a historical average return of 10%. In 20 years, you will not just have a meaningless piece of paper saying your house is paid off, you will have over $750,000 in highly liquid compounding assets. The difference is an absolute fortune of pure, unadulterated freedom. The difference between having all your wealth hopelessly trapped in drywall and having a massive liquid war chest ready to deploy into the next technological revolution. I saw this exact scenario play out perfectly with countless tech founders and Thiel fellows who possessed the sheer intellectual courage to completely ignore their cheap liabilities. They kept their low-interest debt exactly where it was, completely ignored the collective outrage of their conservative parents and peers, retained their massive liquid capital, and built software companies that generated millions of dollars in highly profitable revenue before they even reached their 30s, achieving a level of sovereignty that their debt-free, cash-poor classmates will never see in their entire lifetimes. Contrarian wealth builders absolutely refuse to pay off cheap debt because they deeply understand a fundamental law of the modern macroeconomic universe that true wealth is not achieved by minimizing small liabilities. It is an asymmetric leap from 0 to 1 achieved by maximizing highly scalable assets. It is about building monopolies of one and escaping the middle-class mindset entirely, whereas the herd lives paycheck to paycheck, terrified of the concept of leverage, and aggressively takes all their extra cash to pay off a 4% loan while actual inflation runs at 6 or 7% because they completely buy into the moral superiority myth, deeply convinced that being completely debt-free will somehow protect them from the harsh, inflationary realities of a rapidly changing global fiat economy. The mathematical result of these two diverging paths after 20 years is staggering and completely irrefutable. The first group, the independent thinkers, commands massive liquid portfolios, extreme flexibility, and total autonomy over their time and investments, while the second group is hopelessly cash poor, sitting proudly in a paid-off house but completely unable to start a business, fund a brilliant idea, or survive a sudden medical emergency without taking on toxic, high-interest credit card debt. The difference is literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in net worth and a lifetime of optionality versus an entire lifetime of fragile, illiquid anxiety. And the systemic failure of capital allocation goes even deeper when we examine the second massive, mathematically catastrophic error, which is the total liquidation of your emergency capital, or your vital seed money to completely pay off a mid-interest car loan or a personal loan in one massive lump sum simply because you fundamentally cannot handle the psychological weight of a monthly payment and require the immediate, fleeting dopamine hit of a zero balance. The herd completely fails to understand the advanced concept of asymmetric risk and the absolute supreme value of maintaining cash liquidity in a highly volatile, unpredictable world. They genuinely believe with every fiber of their being that sending $30,000 of their hard-earned, highly versatile cash to a massive automotive dealership or a centralized bank to eliminate a 5 or 6% interest rate is a profound stroke of financial genius, completely ignoring the devastating fact that they have just willingly disarmed themselves. They have voluntarily handed over the exact seed capital they desperately need to rapidly seize a sudden market opportunity to start an asymmetric digital business, to survive a catastrophic economic downturn, or to aggressively buy assets when blood is in the streets without facing absolute, unrecoverable ruin. They are foolishly trading true, anti-fragile financial security for the completely false, fragile illusion of being debt-free. Let us aggressively do the brutal, unforgiving math on this widely accepted middle-class illusion right now. If you are 28 years old and you take $30,000 of your absolute best, most liquid savings to completely pay off a 5% interest car loan simply to impress yourself and feel morally superior to your peers, you are instantly destroying your leverage. You are voluntarily bankrupting your own opportunity fund, and if you look at the projection for the next 20 years, that $30,000 is completely dead. It is permanently trapped in a rapidly depreciating piece of metal that sits in a suburban parking lot, losing value every single second the engine runs. You evaporated a massive chunk of your wealth-building engine into a broken consumer system. This is the real, quantifiable cost of following the herd into the liquidity trap. You are trading your prime years of innovation and capital deployment for a false sense of peace, leaving yourself entirely vulnerable to the whims of your corporate employer because you no longer have a cash shield. Now, look at the cold, calculating contrarian path. If you step completely out of the matrix today, refuse to participate in this liquidity drain. Keep the $30,000 entirely in your control, comfortably make the minimal monthly payment on that depreciating liability, and allocate your preserved massive capital towards an asymmetric advantage or a high-yield index fund, investing that $30,000 up front with a historical average return of 10% in the S&P 500. In 20 years, you will not just have an old, worthless car, you will have over $240,000 in highly liquid compounding assets. The difference is over $200,000 of pure, unadulterated freedom, the difference between being a fragile, cash-poor consumer and being an anti-fragile, highly liquid capital allocator ready to strike when the herd is panicking. I saw this exact highly predictable scenario play out perfectly with brilliant young engineers who possessed the intellectual courage to completely ignore the social pressure to pay cash for depreciating assets. They aggressively financed their basic living requirements at low fixed rates, completely ignored the collective outrage of traditional financial advisors, retained their massive liquid capital, and used that precise liquidity to bootstrap software companies that generated millions of dollars in highly profitable revenue before they even reached their 30s, achieving a level of sovereignty that their debt-free, cash-poor, heavily stressed classmates will never see in their entire lifetimes. Contrarian wealth builders absolutely refuse to liquidate their cash for mid-interest debt because they deeply understand that capital is ammunition, and trying to build wealth without liquidity is exactly like trying to fight a war without bullets. It is an asymmetric leap from 0 to 1 achieved only by maximizing highly scalable assets, whereas the herd lives paycheck to paycheck, terrified of owing anything, and aggressively takes all their emergency cash to pay off a liability while actual inflation destroys their purchasing power because they completely buy into the moral superiority myth, deeply convinced that having no payments will somehow protect them from the harsh, inflationary realities of a rapidly changing global economy. The mathematical result of these two diverging paths after 20 years is staggering and completely irrefutable. The first group, the independent thinkers, commands massive liquid portfolios, extreme flexibility, and total autonomy over their time, while the second group is hopelessly cash poor, sitting proudly in a paid-off depreciating car but completely unable to start a business, fund a brilliant idea, or survive a sudden corporate layoff without taking on toxic 24% high-interest credit card debt. The difference is literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in net worth and a lifetime of optionality versus an entire lifetime of fragile, illiquid anxiety. And let me present you with a completely different, highly contrarian paradigm for the third catastrophic error, which is the total misunderstanding of inflation and the cowardice of refusing to actively use fixed-rate debt as a deliberate short position against a collapsing fiat currency. The herd genuinely believes that all debt is a heavy burden that must be aggressively destroyed, completely failing to realize that when you borrow fixed-rate money in an inflationary environment, the government and the central banks are actively paying off your debt for you through the silent, invisible devaluation of the currency. Following the traditional path of paying off cheap debt during high inflation is exactly like fighting a brutal war of attrition against mathematics itself, where you are guaranteed to lose your purchasing power. Let us look at the devastating mathematics of playing it safe and misunderstanding macroeconomics. If you are 40 years old and you hold a $100,000 business loan or real estate mortgage locked in at 4% interest, and you aggressively throw an extra $2,000 a month at it to pay it off early, simply because a radio host told you debt is evil, while the actual inflation rate is running at 7%, you are violently bleeding your purchasing power every single year. You are taking highly valuable dollars today and giving them to the bank to pay off a loan that is naturally evaporating, and in 15 years this transforms into a massive loss of capital. Evaporating hundreds of thousands of dollars in pure opportunity cost into a broken, fee-extracting financial system, this is the real cost of your total failure of imagination and your blind, obedient trust in conventional, intellectually lazy financial advice. Now, if you step out of the matrix today, completely stop overpaying that heavily subsidized loan, aggressively educate yourself on asymmetric risk and invest that extra $2,000 a month into high-conviction assets, disruptive technologies, or your own scalable digital business with a potential return of 20%. In 15 years, you will have over $1 million in liquid capital, while the original $100,000 debt has been completely eaten away by inflation and is now worth a fraction of its original purchasing power. The difference is not just financial. The difference is total, irreversible liberation from the state and the corporate machine. The people who actually win in this country, the contrarians who dictate the future, do not wait for the government to save them. They understand that fixed-rate debt is a financial weapon used to short the government's reckless money printing. They take extreme ownership, they completely bypass the corporate hierarchy, and they build absolute monopolies of one by weaponizing their liabilities. Contrarian wealth builders violently seek exponential returns and utilize leverage because they understand that trying to build wealth by competing with everyone else in a zero-debt, zero-risk paradigm is a mathematical guarantee of achieving only average, mediocre results. The herd lives paycheck to paycheck and hopes for a microscopic 3% annual raise because they completely buy into the safe, debt-free myth, terrified of taking a single intelligent risk. The result after 15 years is completely binary. The first group commands vast fortunes, total autonomy, and true power by using the bank's money to build their own empires. The second group is drowning in the system, completely reliant on a broken social security net, proudly holding zero debt but possessing absolutely zero wealth. The difference is generational wealth and millions of dollars. So what exactly do you do from now on? How do you escape this deeply entrenched systemic trap and weaponize your capital? You need an immediate, ruthless, and entirely uncompromising action plan, a complete mental checklist to break your decades of social conditioning. First, you must step entirely out of the debt payoff matrix in the next 24 hours, completely stop sending extra payments to any fixed-rate loan that is under 5 or 6%, halt your aggressive mortgage payoffs, stop liquidating your cash to appease your anxiety, and completely stop caring entirely about what mediocre losers and your conventional family members think of your leveraged lifestyle. Then you must aggressively find your asymmetric advantage, take that massive, newly freed monthly cash flow, and deploy your resources ruthlessly this very month into acquiring a specific, highly scalable skill that has infinite leverage, like complex coding. Digital media creation or advanced capital allocation, you must stop spreading your finite energy across 50 mediocre, safe ideas and concentrate all of your capital and focus on the one single contrarian thing that actually works. There are absolutely no more excuses for following the herd, because the historical information asymmetry that used to heavily protect the elite institutions no longer exists. The knowledge to use leverage like the wealthy is entirely free, but the execution requires supreme intellectual courage. You are facing a dramatic, irreversible choice right now, looking down two completely divergent paths. You can confidently and comfortably continue on the exact path of the herd, taking your precious liquid capital and handing it to banking institutions to pay off cheap debt, begging middle managers for incremental promotions because you have no cash cushion to quit, trading your finite time for depreciating dollars, and ultimately retiring at 65 years old with a broken body, a paid-off house but an empty bank account, and a profound sense of regret, forced to compete for scraps and completely reliant on a failing economic system that never cared about you in the first place. Or you can wake up today, look the mathematical reality of the situation in the face, aggressively reject the competition, stop doing exactly what everyone else is doing. Embrace intelligent leverage and start building true exponential wealth right now. The ultimate formula for absolute failure is simply doing what everyone else is doing, treating debt like a moral failing instead of a mathematical tool, and expecting a different, exceptional result. The anti-debt, hyper-conservative financial entertainment industry is the absolute biggest, most destructive psychological trap in modern human history, heavily designed to keep the middle class completely unleveraged and docile, and your active, conscious refusal to participate in it, your decision to hoard cash and deploy it asymmetrically, is your absolute greatest weapon. Time is rapidly running out to secure your financial independence before the system completely consolidates its power over the terrified middle class. If this video shattered your conventional, comfortable illusions about money today, if you are finally ready to step out of the herd and utilize capital like the elite, leave your like down below, subscribe to the channel right now, and share this with someone who desperately needs to wake up from the matrix, because following the crowd and paying off cheap debt in America today is a mathematically guaranteed path to total financial ruin. You must stop competing, you must start inventing, you must weaponize your liabilities, and you must make the definitive leap from 0 to 1.